Has this ever happened to you? When a woman grows tired not just in her body but in her soul. When she realizes she is no longer chasing someone to love her, no longer bending herself into shapes to be chosen, no longer performing the quiet, invisible rituals of proving her worth. Something ancient begins to awaken inside her. The energy that once ran outward, desperate to be seen, to be held, to be wanted, turns inward, back toward its true origin. And in that turning, everything begins to change. In Jungian terms, this is the first whisper of individuation, the soul's natural movement toward wholeness. For years, she may have lived under the spell of an inner complex, the belief that love must be earned, that value is something reflected back from the eyes of another. She may have mistaken attention for affection, and affection for validation. Her animus, the inner masculine archetype that represents reason, purpose, and will, might have been projected outward onto men who seemed strong, confident, or mysterious. They became mirrors for what she had not yet owned within herself, but the mirrors always cracked. The dream always dissolved. Because projection cannot sustain itself indefinitely. It must return home. When a woman stops chasing love, she does not stop loving. Love is her nature, her breath, her essence. What stops is the illusion that she must seek completion outside of herself. The same energy that once chased becomes the very energy that builds. It becomes creativity, clarity, discernment. She begins to see how the world once fed on her need, how society films. Even the gentle whispers of romantic ideals told her she must be chosen to be whole. But Jung reminds us that the unlived life, the disowned self, never dies. It waits beneath the surface in the shadow. And when she stops running, she meets that shadow face to face. It is not soft. It is not comforting. It is full of anger, grief, forgotten power. She meets the part of herself that was silenced, the one who raged when she was ignored, the one who feared she would disappear without someone's gaze upon her. She learns that what she thought was love was often control disguised as care, or fear disguised as devotion. And as she sees it all, something remarkable happens. The shadow no longer terrifies her. It begins to guide her. It becomes an inner compass pointing her toward authenticity. She remembers the words of the Stoics, that peace is found not in what happens to us, but in how we respond. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." And so what once felt like heartbreak becomes initiation. The wound is no longer an enemy, it becomes a teacher. The same ache that once drove her to chase now drives her to create boundaries, to seek solitude, to build an inner world that no longer collapses when someone leaves. There is something profoundly magnetic about a woman who no longer seeks validation. She doesn't reject love, she simply no longer kneels before it. Her worth is no longer in question, and because of that she becomes paradoxically more desired. But now desire no longer controls her. She can stand before admiration and not lose herself. She can face rejection and remain whole, because she has touched the part of herself that cannot be taken. In Jung's language, she begins the integration of her animus, no longer projected outward, but embodied within. Her actions become deliberate, her thoughts sharp, her direction firm. The feminine within her does not disappear. It deepens, becomes receptive, wise, anchored. She learns that true love is not pursuit but presence, not performance but participation. The dance between the masculine and feminine within her becomes balanced, sacred, creative. What was once a restless ache becomes stillness. What was once fear becomes freedom. This woman begins to live not for romance but for meaning. She no longer asks, "Will someone choose me?" Instead she asks, "What am I choosing to create with my life?" Her gaze turns inward, and there she discovers the kingdom she had been searching for all along. But this transformation does not come without loss. The old patterns resist. The ego, once sustained by the drama of longing and the illusion of control, trembles as it dissolves. It will whisper, "You're too cold now. You'll be alone forever. You're losing your softness." Yet beneath that fear, something ancient smiles. Because she has not become cold, she has become clear. And clarity is not the absence of feeling. It is the mastery of it. The woman who stops chasing love begins to embody a quiet power that few can name. People sense it when she enters a room. Not loud, not performative, but undeniably present. She carries herself as if she belongs everywhere and nowhere at once. She no longer competes, compares, or begs to be understood. She knows now that peace is not found in being loved by others, but in loving herself enough to stop needing to be needed. And that is when she becomes unstoppable. There is a subtle shift that happens when a woman no longer orbits around the gravitational pull of romantic validation. It is not dramatic, and it does not happen overnight. It unfolds quietly, like dawn breaking through a long night. At first, she may not even recognize it. She just feels tired, not physically, but soul-weary. The endless cycles of trying, waiting, hoping begin to feel hollow. The patterns that once gave her identity now feel like chains. And so, almost imperceptibly, she stops. She stops chasing. She stops negotiating her worth. She lets silence replace strategy. And in that silence, she meets herself for the first time. Jung would call this the meeting of the self, the archetype of totality, the deepest center of the psyche that has always been waiting to emerge. When a woman stops pursuing love, she no longer feeds the false gods of external approval. Instead, she turns toward the sacred temple within. It is there that she realizes something essential. She has been projecting her own divine qualities onto others. Every man she ever loved deeply, every heart she ever chased, was in some way a mirror of her own unlived potential. She had been seeing her strength in their confidence, her wisdom in their mystery, her tenderness in their fleeting affection. They were not her completion, they were her reflection. Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." And so, when she stops chasing, fate itself begins to change. The unconscious scripts, the ones that told her she was incomplete, unchosen, or undeserving, begin to lose their power. She no longer acts them out. She observes them. She begins to understand the story beneath the story, the psychological architecture of her own longing. This is where the journey turns inward, into the deep forest of the soul. There she finds not just beauty but chaos, all the parts of herself she disowned in her pursuit of love. The anger she was told was too much. The ambition she learned to hide to be more likable. The intuition she dismissed as irrational. All these fragments wait in the dark, whispering, "Welcome home." It is no longer about love in the romantic sense. It becomes love as wholeness, love as awareness. She starts to nurture her inner world the way she once nurtured others. She honors her rest, her intuition, her voice. She creates not to be seen, but because creation itself is a sacred act. She learns that what she was chasing in others was not affection. It was the lost dialogue with her own soul. The Stoics remind us that freedom is not the absence of attachment, but the mastery of it. Seneca wrote, "He who is brave is free." The bravery here is not in rejecting love, but in facing the emptiness that follows when you stop defining yourself through it. That emptiness is sacred. It is the space where the self begins to emerge. And yet this transformation often confuses those who once knew her. Some will say she's changed. Some will accuse her of being detached or hard. But in truth, she has simply stopped performing the archetype of the good woman, the one who sacrifices herself for harmony, who carries others' emotional burdens, who believes that to be loved she must be less. She no longer plays that role, and in doing so she threatens the unconscious patterns around her. People sense that her energy is no longer available for their projections, and it unsettles them. But she does not explain herself anymore. She no longer rushes to correct others' misunderstandings or soften their discomfort. She realizes that silence is not distance, it is dignity. In that stillness she begins to hear a different voice, one that is not born from fear or need. It is quiet, steady, ancient. It tells her, "You were never meant to be small. You were never meant to chase what is already yours, and what is hers cannot be taken." It is the inner sovereignty that comes from self-knowledge. It is the quiet confidence of a woman who understands that love, like light, radiates outward only when it first burns within. In Jung's mythic language, she begins to embody the archetype of the self-realized feminine. Not the maiden who waits, not the lover who chases, but the queen who creates. She becomes the axis around which her world turns, not through domination, but through balance. Her outer life becomes a reflection of her inner order. Relationships shift, careers evolve, Her sense of purpose deepens. She becomes less reactive, more intuitive. She no longer seeks intensity to feel alive. She has found aliveness in stillness. The unstoppable part of her is not a warrior's aggression. It is presence itself. It is the serene certainty that comes from knowing who she is and who she is not. There comes a time when the world begins to respond differently to her. People notice something, a certain quiet power and unshakable calm. It's not arrogance. It's not withdrawal. It's the kind of presence that makes noise fall away. She doesn't need to explain herself anymore because her energy speaks first. She's become what Jung might call individuated, a human being whose inner and outer worlds are finally in dialogue. When she walks into a room now, she doesn't wonder who might notice her. She observes. She reads the room with an intuitive precision that once eluded her because she was too busy seeking approval. Now her perception is her ally. Her sensitivity, once her greatest vulnerability, has transformed into discernment. She no longer mistakes chemistry for connection or intensity for intimacy. The men she once found magnetic now seem transparent, not because they changed, but because her perception did. Her unconscious projections have dissolved. The veil has lifted, and yet this clarity comes with a strange melancholy. When illusions die, they leave silence behind. She begins to see the world as it is, not as she wished it to be. This is the Jungian night sea journey, when the soul passes through darkness not as punishment, but as purification. The ego mourns the loss of fantasy, while the deeper self whispers, "This is what freedom feels like." Freedom is not glamorous at first. It's raw, it's quiet. It's the long pause between who she was and who she's becoming. Sometimes it feels like nothing is happening, but underneath everything is changing. Jung called this process the alchemy of transformation, when the base metal of suffering is turned into gold through consciousness. What once broke her now refines her. What once defined her now dissolves into wisdom. She begins to notice the subtle difference between loneliness and solitude. Loneliness is the hunger for external validation. Solitude is the sanctuary of the soul. In solitude, she meets her own company and finds it exquisite. She reads, she walks, she creates. She learns to listen not just to her thoughts, but to what lies beneath them. She begins to understand that her worth is not a negotiation. It is a constant. The Stoics, too, spoke of this kind of peace. Epictetus taught that freedom comes when we no longer depend on what we cannot control. She sees now how much of her life had been controlled by longing, for love, for recognition, for certainty. But the moment she releases her grip, everything she truly needs begins to flow toward her. Not because she demands it, but because her energy no longer repels it through fear. There's a paradox here. When a woman stops chasing love, love begins to find her in new forms. It comes through art, through friendship, through the quiet joy of being alive. She starts to see love not as possession, but as expression, something she gives freely because it no longer depletes her. Her heart opens again, but this time with boundaries that honor her soul. She knows now that saying no is an act of love, the kind that protects the sacred space of her becoming. This transformation also softens her, not into submission, but into compassion. She no longer resents those who once hurt her. She sees their wounds for what they were, unconscious shadows acting out their pain. Jung said, "The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. Every heartbreak, every rejection, every moment of chasing was a reaction that transformed her. It was never wasted. In time, she begins to sense her purpose again. But now it's not born of proving anything. It emerges naturally, like water finding its path. She no longer seeks to impress. She seeks to express. The difference is everything. Her work, her voice, her relationships, all of it begins to align with her inner truth. People often mistake this peace for detachment, but it's the opposite. It's the fullness of being present without needing to control the outcome. She can love deeply now because she no longer fears loss. She can give because she no longer needs to be given to. She has become what Jung described as whole, not perfect. And so the unstoppable part of her is not that she cannot be hurt. She can. But pain no longer defines her. Her strength is not the absence of vulnerability. It's the refusal to abandon herself in the face of it. She has discovered the art of self-return, and that is a kind of magic the world cannot take away. There is a point in every woman's awakening when she realizes she no longer wants to be understood. She wants to be true. This is the quiet revolution that follows her withdrawal from the chase. For so long, her energy moved outward, trying to be chosen, to be seen, to be understood. But now the axis has turned inward. She no longer lives to fit into someone else's story. She writes her own. This turning inward is not selfishness. It is psychological integration. Jung wrote that individuation is not about becoming perfect, but about becoming whole. Wholeness requires meeting the opposites within oneself. Light and shadow, tenderness and ferocity, need and independence. When a woman stops chasing love, she stops splitting herself. She allows contradiction to exist without shame. She can be soft and strong, nurturing and assertive, loving and unattached. Her emotional life, once governed by reaction, becomes guided by reflection. She no longer asks, "Why did he leave?" but "What part of me sought something outside that I hadn't yet cultivated within?" This is not self-blame, it is self-awareness. It's the moment she understands that every love story was a mirror, and every heartbreak, a map. Slowly, the fear of being alone transforms into the serenity of belonging to herself. She learns that solitude is not the absence of connection, but the presence of self. She begins to see her own patterns of emotional survival, the ways she adapted to avoid rejection, the masks she wore to feel safe. And when she takes off those masks, the woman beneath them breathes for the first time. The Stoics would call this the return to the self-governed life, a life where peace depends only on one's own inner state. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength." That realization is what now anchors her. She no longer clings to the tides of others' emotions. She becomes the shore. But this evolution does not erase her desire for love. It purifies it. Love no longer comes from emptiness but from fullness. She doesn't chase because she doesn't need to. Her heart is no longer a begging bowl. It's a vessel overflowing with its own light. From this place, love becomes devotion without dependency, giving without depletion, intimacy without loss of self. In Jungian terms, she has integrated the animus, her inner masculine principle of focus, structure, and sovereignty. This integration allows her to hold herself the way she once longed to be held. She no longer needs someone to make her feel safe, because she has built that safety within. She no longer yearns to be completed, because she has met her own other half. Her feminine no longer fears her masculine. They dance within her now, balanced, fluid, sacred. The animus gives her direction. The anima, her feminine essence, gives her intuition. Together they create the harmony that once seemed impossible. She becomes, as Jung said, a vessel for the union of opposites, the sacred marriage of the psyche. From this union comes creation. Many women, upon reaching this stage, begin to create art, businesses, movements, or communities. They pour into the world what they once poured into others. Their energy becomes generative, not performative. The love that once chased now builds, now heals, now transforms. The world may not understand her transformation. Some will say she's different, unreachable, too intense, too calm. But these judgments no longer move her. She understands that people often fear what they cannot possess, and they cannot possess what is free. Her freedom is not rebellion, it's alignment. It's the natural state of a woman who remembers her divinity. The unstoppable force she has become is not loud. It does not demand attention. It radiates from the quiet knowing that she has already won, not over others, but over her own illusions. Her beauty now is not in her appearance, but in her presence. Her value not in being chosen, but in choosing herself again and again. And in this self-choosing, something extraordinary happens. Life begins to mirror her wholeness. Opportunities align, relationships evolve, coincidences multiply. What once required effort now arrives effortlessly, because energy that is whole attracts from wholeness, not from need. Love may still come to her, but now it is a meeting of equals, not a rescue mission. It is soul-recognizing soul, not shadow-seeking refuge. It is no longer the love that consumes, but the love that liberates. She has become the embodiment of Jung's greatest insight. The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. And now, She has. There comes a sacred calm when a woman finally stops seeking what was never lost. The pursuit ends, and in its place rises a radiant quiet, the kind that does not crave, does not chase, does not demand. It simply is. This is not resignation, but realization. The long, painful pilgrimage toward love outside herself has brought her home. And home, she discovers, was never a person. It was presence. In this new state, she lives differently. Time slows down. The small things, sunlight spilling across, her floor, the sound of her own laughter, the stillness before dawn, become enough. Her nervous system, once ruled by anticipation and anxiety, begins to rest. She no longer waits for a message, a gesture, a sign. She no longer negotiates her peace through someone else's attention. The constant hypervigilance that once defined her, the anxious scanning for signs of rejection, dissolves into still awareness. She can finally breathe, and in that breath, life itself changes its rhythm. Jung wrote that the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. But this is exactly what she has done. She has made peace with the parts that once frightened her, the needy one, the jealous one, the hopeful one, the one who longed to be seen. She no longer tries to silence them. She holds them. She understands that love was never about banishing her imperfections, but about bringing them into light. From this wholeness, compassion flows effortlessly. She can look at the version of herself who once begged, waited, and chased, and smile. Not in judgment, but in gratitude. Because without that woman, this one would not exist. The pain, the patterns, the heartbreak, they were not detours. They were initiation rites into the mystery of her own becoming. The Stoics, too, would see this as victory, not the loud external kind, but the inner triumph of self-mastery. Marcus Aurelius taught that a man's true delight is to do the things he was made for. Now she understands that she was not made to pursue, to please, to perform. She was made to be, to create, to expand, to love without losing herself. Love for her now is no longer a goal. It is a frequency. It is how she moves through the world. She no longer asks, "Who will love me?" She asks, "How can I love more fully, without fear, without possession, without performance?" Her love has become devotional, not directional. It is not aimed, it radiates. In Jungian terms, she has reached the symbolic union of anima and animus, the sacred marriage within. Her inner masculine provides groundedness and purpose. Her inner feminine offers intuition and receptivity. Together, they create what Jung called the self, the totality of the psyche. It is the stage of individuation where opposites reconcile, where the unconscious and conscious no longer battle, but dance. The world senses this integration, though it may not have language for it. Some will be drawn to her, magnetized by her stillness. Others may retreat, unsettled by her autonomy. But she no longer measures her worth by others' comfort. She knows that freedom can be intimidating to those still imprisoned by their own projections, so she blesses them and continues walking. Her path is no longer one of persuasion, but of presence, and with each step her energy becomes unstoppable. Not because she resists, but because she flows. Like water, she no longer argues with form. She becomes it. Obstacles turn into pathways, endings into beginnings. What used to feel like rejection now feels like redirection. What once felt like loss now feels like liberation. She begins to teach without teaching. Simply by existing in truth, she becomes an archetype, the woman who has returned to herself. Others see her and begin to question their own chasing, their own compromises. She doesn't preach, she embodies. And embodiment is the highest form of wisdom. There is nothing left to prove. She knows that everything she sought through love, belonging, peace, joy, validation, was never meant to come from another. It was meant to come through her. That is the secret Jung and the mystics have always pointed to. The divine is not outside of us. It is expressed through our becoming conscious of it. And so she lives now in quiet radiance, neither grasping nor retreating, neither craving nor controlling. Her love has no agenda, no fear of loss. She loves because she is love. When a woman stops chasing love, she becomes unstoppable, not because she has hardened, but because she has softened into truth. She moves through the world with the kind of grace that only those who have known both longing and liberation can embody. Her presence itself becomes a form of healing, her peace a form of power. And this is the essence of individuation, the soul's final awakening. To no longer run from yourself, to no longer seek what you already are, to remember that love was never something to find, it was something to remember. She is not waiting anymore. She is not chasing anymore. She has arrived. Thank you for spending this time with us. Your journey gives life to this channel. Stay with us, and together we'll keep exploring, growing, and discovering the truths that shape the soul. Until the next video, take care and see you soon. Has this ever happened to you? The moment when silence feels heavier than words, when instead of reacting, you simply breathe and choose peace, and somehow everything changes? There was a time when she would have argued, explained, fought to be understood. Her energy was fire, bright, consuming, desperate to prove its worth. But something within her began to shift. It wasn't a surrender. It wasn't weakness. It was awakening. In Jungian psychology, there comes a moment in the process of individuation when a woman begins to see the chaos not as something outside of her, but as a mirror of the conflict within. The people who trigger her, the ones who drain her with their endless drama, are no longer enemies to conquer, but reflections of the unhealed fragments of her own shadow. This realization is the beginning of her quiet revolution. She doesn't need to shout anymore, because she finally understands the deeper war was never between her and the world. It was between her ego's hunger for validation and her soul's longing for peace. Most people never reach this understanding. They live trapped in reaction, in the loop of projection. Every insult, every rejection, every cold silence is seen as proof of unworthiness. Jung wrote that what we do not make conscious will control us, and it will appear in our life as fate. So she lived for years repeating the same story with different faces. Men who misunderstood her, friends who betrayed her, family who criticized her sensitivity. She thought she was cursed with bad luck or bad people. But what she was truly facing was her own shadow, her unclaimed power disguised as chaos. Peace began the day she stopped trying to fix others and started seeing through them. She began to understand that drama is a form of unconsciousness, a desperate attempt by the ego to stay alive through emotional conflict. When you are addicted to the noise, silence feels like death. But when she faced that silence and refused to fill it with fear or words, something ancient and sacred awakened in her. Her stillness became her sword. The modern world celebrates the woman who reacts, the one who proves herself, who claps back, who burns the bridge before someone else does. But beneath the applause lies a deeper truth. Constant reaction is the prison of the wounded feminine. Jung called this the possession by the animus, when the inner masculine of a woman becomes distorted by anger and control rather than clarity and purpose. She becomes sharp, restless, exhausted, mistaking power for aggression, mistaking chaos for aliveness. When she chooses peace, however, she calls back her energy from the battlefield of others' emotions. She no longer seeks to win arguments, to correct misunderstandings, or to convince anyone of her worth. This isn't because she doesn't care. It's because she finally understands that her energy is sacred currency. To spend it on noise is to abandon her own temple. In the stillness of her transformation, she learns a paradox. Peace does not mean passivity. It is not the silence of the oppressed, but the composure of the wise. It is the awareness that her emotions are waves, not the ocean. She can let them rise and fall without drowning in them. She can see a person's cruelty and not take it personally. She can watch the storm without entering it. This is not detachment born from numbness, but from clarity. The understanding that everything she used to chase was only a projection of her inner void. You might feel this shift too, the moment you stop trying to win the game of emotional survival. Suddenly, what once fascinated you begins to lose its shine. Gossip, conflict, power struggles. All the noise that used to keep your mind spinning begins to sound hollow. You no longer crave the high of being right. You crave the peace of being free. The ego mourns this loss because without drama, it has nothing to feed on. But the soul celebrates, because now, finally, there is space for truth. Carl Jung wrote that only when you turn inward and make peace with your inner world can you see the outer world clearly. So she began to listen, not to others, but to the quiet voice that had been whispering all along. You do not need to prove your light. Just become it. And in that moment, something miraculous happened. The more peace she cultivated, the less chaos found her. The people who thrived on her reaction faded away, as if the universe itself no longer had use for that lesson. She learned that peace is magnetic. It doesn't demand attention. It draws it effortlessly. It doesn't chase. It attracts. The men who once tested her boundaries no longer fascinated her. The friends who thrived on emotional storms no longer resonated. Her energy had changed frequency, and therefore her reality had to follow. The world didn't suddenly become kind. It was she who became conscious. And consciousness is the greatest protection of all. There was once a time when her peace was mistaken for weakness. People who thrived on conflict saw her calm and assumed she was easy to manipulate. But that illusion could not last. For peace, when rooted in consciousness, is not fragile. It is unshakable. It is the power that arises when one has walked through every fire and no longer fears burning. The woman who chooses peace does not do so because she has escaped her darkness. She does so because she has made peace with it. Jung spoke of the shadow, that hidden realm within the psyche where we bury what we do not wish to see. Jealousy, anger, fear, desire for control. For years she tried to be the good woman, the one who never raised her voice, who pleased everyone, who smiled even when her soul was breaking. But the shadow does not vanish through denial. It grows stronger, waiting for the moment to erupt. And when it finally does, it does not ask permission. Her journey toward peace began when she stopped pretending to be pure light, when she sat with her anger and realized it was only the voice of her unmet needs. When she faced her jealousy and discovered beneath it the longing to be seen, to be loved without condition. When she looked into her bitterness and saw it as grief, grief for all the time she abandoned herself just to be accepted. Most people run from this inner work because it is excruciating. It requires you to look at yourself without filters, to confront the smallness, the cruelty, the self-deception within. But she understood that to own her shadow was to reclaim her power. For the woman who integrates her darkness no longer projects it onto others. She no longer needs to control or judge because she has met her own depths. The more she accepts herself, the less the outer world has power to wound her. And this is where the transformation becomes unstoppable. When she walks into a room now, her presence does not demand attention, it commands it. Not through charm or beauty, but through a subtle gravity, the kind that only those who have suffered and healed can carry. There is no pretense in her aura, no frantic need to prove. Her silence is a mirror. It reflects others' unconsciousness back to them. Some find this unsettling, others find it magnetic. In Jungian terms, she has begun the process of individuation, the path toward becoming whole. It is not about perfection. It is about integration. Her peace is not a mask, but a state of alignment between her conscious self and her unconscious depths. Every emotion is allowed to exist, but none is allowed to rule. She can feel pain without drowning, love without losing herself, forgive without forgetting the lesson. And here lies the paradox. Peace, once found, does not isolate her from life. It connects her to it more deeply than ever before. When she was driven by drama, she lived in survival, seeing others as threats or saviors. But now she sees them as mirrors, as teachers. The person who provokes her reveals where she still holds attachment. The one who abandons her teaches her where she still fears her own solitude. Every encounter becomes a dialogue with her own soul. You may wonder, how can peace be so powerful when the world seems to reward noise, confrontation, and dominance? The answer is that peace is the highest form of power precisely because it cannot be taken away. It is the inner sovereignty that no insult, betrayal, or failure can destroy. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength." That strength, when embodied by a woman, is something the world does not yet fully understand. She becomes like still water, calm on the surface but infinitely deep. No one can predict her next move because she is no longer reacting to external forces. She acts from inner knowing. Her choices are not impulsive but intuitive, born from a place that transcends ego and fear. And yet this peace is not cold or detached. It is warm, compassionate, fiercely kind, because she understands now that everyone she meets is fighting a battle within. Those who gossip, attack, or manipulate are simply unconscious, enslaved by their shadows. She no longer takes it personally, because she has done that work herself. Her compassion does not make her naive. It makes her free. There is a peculiar beauty in her presence now. The way she speaks softly but her words land like thunder. The way her boundaries are firm but her heart remains open. The way she can walk away not out of bitterness but out of sacred preservation. She is no longer chasing closure because she has already found it within herself. She has become the embodiment of still power, a living reminder that peace is not the absence of emotion, but mastery over it. And when you reach that point, when you choose peace over drama, not as a tactic but as a truth, something within you begins to glow quietly, eternally. The storms may still come, but they can no longer touch the core of who you are, because you have found the eye of the storm, the unmoving center where the soul resides, serene and untouched. There came a time when her silence no longer frightened her. It nourished her. The woman who once filled every quiet space with words, apologies, explanations, began to find something sacred in saying nothing at all. For in silence she could finally hear what the world's noise had drowned out, her own truth. Before this, her life had been a series of reactions to people's opinions, to disappointments, to the unpredictable waves of love and rejection. Each time she felt misunderstood, her instinct was to fight harder for understanding. Each time she felt unloved, she would give more of herself, hoping it would earn her the affection she craved. But the more she tried to control others' perceptions, the more she lost touch with her own essence. It was in solitude that she discovered what Jung called the self, the deeper, archetypal core that exists beyond the ego's illusions. The ego is the part of us that wants to be liked, admired, approved. The self, however, seeks only wholeness. And to serve that wholeness, life will often strip away everything false. The relationships that once felt essential begin to fade. The achievements that once seemed meaningful start to feel hollow. At first, this unraveling feels like loss, but it is not destruction. It is purification. She came to understand that peace isn't something you achieve. It's something you return to when the noise falls away. It was always there, hidden beneath the constant need to prove and please. Peace is not created. It's revealed when illusion collapses. There were moments when she felt lonely in her newfound stillness. The world around her kept spinning in chaos. Friends chasing validation, lovers playing emotional games, co-workers drowning in competition. Sometimes she questioned if she had become too detached, too distant. But then she realized something profound. Peace doesn't make you distant. It makes you discerning. You stop confusing attachment with love, intensity with connection, noise with meaning. When a woman reaches this stage, she begins to embody what ancient mystics called the inner sanctuary. Her life may still be busy, but her inner state remains untouched. No one can pull her into drama without her permission. No insult can reach her core. She has learned the sacred art of the pause, the moment between stimulus and response where true freedom lives. This is what the Stoics spoke of when they said, "We suffer more in imagination than in reality." Epictetus taught that it's not events themselves that disturb us, but our interpretation of them. She lives by this now. When someone disrespects her, she no longer reacts with anger. She observes. She sees the other person's behavior as a projection of their inner turmoil. When plans fall apart, she no longer panics. She trusts that what is meant for her cannot be lost. Her calm is not indifference. It is alignment with the flow of life. It was Jung who said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." For years, her fate seemed to repeat, the same heartbreaks, the same betrayals, the same emotional exhaustion. Now she sees why. Her unconscious patterns were writing her story. Every argument she entered, every emotional storm she fed, was a reflection of an inner wound demanding to be seen. But when she stopped feeding the wound, when she stopped reacting from pain and began responding from awareness, the pattern lost its power. This is the alchemy of transformation, the turning of emotional lead into spiritual gold. The fire of conflict becomes the crucible where consciousness is forged. You may feel it too, that moment when you're tempted to defend yourself, to prove, to react, and something inside whispers, "Don't." You pause, you breathe, and in that stillness you realize you've just broken an ancient pattern. That single pause is evolution. The woman who chooses peace becomes dangerous in a beautiful way, not because she seeks power over others, but because she cannot be controlled through their chaos. The one who used to beg for understanding now walks away with quiet dignity. The one who used to chase love now radiates it effortlessly. Her energy no longer leaks into every argument, every misunderstanding, every attempt to be seen. It gathers, condenses, strengthens, and when that energy becomes whole, it becomes magnetic. People sense it without knowing why. They feel safer in her presence because she does not project her insecurities onto them. She listens without judgment, speaks with intention, and acts without needing to dominate. Her peace disarms aggression, not through submission but through awareness. There is a saying in Zen, when you understand yourself, you understand everything. That is her reality now. Every encounter, every challenge is a reflection of her own consciousness. The people who trigger her become teachers. The pain that once broke her becomes guidance. She doesn't ask, "Why is this happening to me?" anymore. She asks, "What is this showing me about myself?" That question changes everything, because once you stop fighting with life, life stops fighting with you. Once you stop chasing meaning, meaning reveals itself. And once you stop clinging to drama, you discover that peace was never the absence of emotion. It was the presence of truth. There is a quiet revolution that begins the moment a woman realizes she no longer needs to win. Not the argument, not the affection, not the validation. For so long she believed that peace was something to be earned, a reward that would arrive once everyone finally understood her, once everything around her stopped hurting. But peace is not given. Peace is chosen, again and again, especially when the world gives you every reason to abandon it. The world often mistakes this kind of woman for detached or cold, but that is because they cannot feel the fire she now carries beneath her calm. She has faced the storms of her own psyche, the rage, the despair, the emptiness, and emerged from them purified. Her peace is not the absence of feeling, but the mastery of it. It is the quiet confidence that comes from having survived her own chaos and finding herself on the other side. Unbroken, Jung wrote that the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. For her, this was the true initiation. It required her to look without flinching at the parts of herself she once judged, the part that loved too deeply, the part that needed too much, the part that fought to be seen. She began to understand that the drama she used to attract was not a curse. It was a mirror. It showed her every place she had abandoned her own truth. Each argument was a reflection of an inner split between who she was and who she pretended to be. When she chose peace, she wasn't rejecting emotion. She was reclaiming it from distortion. Anger became clarity. Sadness became depth. Loneliness became communion with her own soul. The energy that once fueled drama now fuels wisdom. The same intensity that once made her reactive now makes her radiant. This shift does not happen overnight. It unfolds slowly, like dawn breaking after a long night. At first, the light is subtle. A small awareness, a moment of restraint, a whisper of intuition. She begins to catch herself before responding to old triggers. She begins to notice that she no longer needs to justify her choices to those who misunderstand her. The world hasn't changed, but her inner landscape has. What once felt like chaos now feels like data. Information revealing who she truly is. And this is what makes her unstoppable. Because when you no longer depend on others to regulate your emotions, you become free. When you no longer let others dictate your worth, you become powerful. And when you no longer need to win, you cannot lose. She has stepped into what Jung might call the wise feminine archetype, the woman who has united her inner opposites. Her light and her shadow are no longer enemies but collaborators. She can be soft without being weak, firm without being harsh, silent without being invisible. She does not seek to control life, because she has learned that life moves with its own intelligence. Her peace is her rebellion against a world addicted to reaction. Sometimes she will still be tested. Old wounds will whisper, old habits will call her back. The universe has a way of checking whether your peace is real or just a performance. A sudden betrayal, a harsh word, an unexpected disappointment. These are her spiritual exams. But now, instead of falling apart, she watches herself respond. She sees the temptation to slip into the old story, the one where she must defend, explain, fight, and she simply smiles. Because she knows that if she can stay centered in that moment, she has already won. You might know this moment too, the quiet satisfaction that comes from not taking the bait. Someone provokes you, but you remain calm. Someone misunderstands you, but you don't rush to explain. Someone withdraws love, but you don't collapse. That is not indifference. That is evolution. She realizes now that the most dangerous addiction is the addiction to emotional drama. It gives the illusion of aliveness, but it feeds only the ego. True vitality, she has learned, comes not from conflict, but from coherence. When her mind, heart, and actions are aligned, her life becomes effortless. She no longer needs chaos to feel significant. She no longer needs to suffer to feel depth. Seneca once said, "He who is brave is free." In her bravery, she has found that freedom. It takes immense courage to be peaceful in a world that profits from your unrest, to say no when manipulation calls, to walk away when ego begs you to stay, to be misunderstood and remain kind. Yet this courage is what makes her luminous. Now she moves through life like a calm river, steady, reflective, unstoppable. She flows around obstacles rather than fighting them. Those who are meant to walk beside her will feel drawn to that current. Those who thrive on chaos will drift away. And she lets them, because she no longer fears endings. She understands they are sacred clearings. Peace has made her untouchable, not because she has armored herself, but because she no longer needs armor. Her openness is her strength, her vulnerability her wisdom. She has learned that nothing real can be threatened, and nothing unreal can last. And so she moves forward, quietly, deliberately, powerfully, no longer seeking the world's permission to rest in her own truth. In time, she began to see that peace was not an achievement, but a state of remembrance, a returning to what was always within her. Beneath all the striving, the heartbreak, the noise, there had always been a quiet core, ancient, steady, indestructible. What Jung called the self is this sacred center, the eternal witness that exists beyond the turbulence of the ego. And once she touched it, even for a moment, she understood. Nothing outside of her could truly harm her again. She used to think that strength meant endurance, holding everything together, proving she could survive anything. Now she sees that true strength is the ability to let go without bitterness. The woman who chooses peace does not resist life. She moves with it. She has learned to trust the intelligence behind every ending, every silence, every unanswered prayer. What once felt like rejection now feels like redirection. What once broke her heart now becomes the doorway to a deeper awakening. Her relationships transform too. Where once she sought intensity, she now seeks resonance. She no longer confuses passion with chaos or attention with affection. She has learned that love does not have to be loud to be real. The people drawn to her now are those who honor her stillness, who understand that peace is not boring. It is rare. Those who once thrived on her reactivity find no foothold anymore. Her calm repels manipulation the way sunlight repels shadows. And still, life will test her. There will be moments when old wounds ache, when someone's indifference reopens a scar, or when the silence of others feels like abandonment. But now, instead of collapsing, she turns inward. She holds that pain as one might hold a child, with tenderness, not judgment, because she knows that peace is not the absence of pain. It is the willingness to face pain without becoming it. She is not immune to emotion. She feels everything, sometimes even more deeply than before. But she no longer fears her feelings because she no longer mistakes them for truth. Emotions are waves, she reminds herself. They rise, crest, and pass. Truth is the ocean beneath them, vast, unmoving, infinite. This is what Jung meant by individuation, the process of becoming whole, not perfect. She no longer seeks to erase her flaws, but to understand them. Every insecurity, every fear, every wound is an invitation to integrate what was once exiled. The shadow, once her enemy, becomes her teacher. Her anger shows her where her boundaries were crossed. Her sadness shows her what she values. Her loneliness shows her where she has yet to meet herself fully. And as she continues this inner dialogue, something miraculous happens. The outer world begins to mirror her transformation. The chaos that once surrounded her dissipates. Opportunities arise that align with her truth. Relationships deepen or dissolve with grace. It's not magic, it's resonance. She has changed her vibration, and life now reorganizes itself to match her new frequency. You might feel this unfolding too. The sense that when you stop forcing outcomes, they begin to flow naturally. When you stop grasping for control, life starts cooperating with you. That's because peace is not passive. It's participatory. It's a dance with the unseen forces that guide your evolution. The Stoics knew this wisdom well. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Accept the things to which fate binds you, and love the people with whom fate brings you together, but do so with all your heart." This is how she lives now, not in resistance, but in reverence. Every experience becomes part of her initiation. Every challenge, a lesson in humility and awareness. There is something sacred about a woman who has found peace after chaos. Her presence is medicine. Children feel safe around her. Friends come to her not for advice, but to feel her calm. Even strangers sense it, that quiet power that needs no explanation. She has become a vessel of stillness in a world addicted to noise. She no longer prays for an easy life. She prays for a conscious one, because she knows now that consciousness is the only real freedom, the only way to move through life untouched by its storms. And so, as the world around her spins faster, she slows down. She watches. She breathes. She chooses peace again and again. Not because it is easy, but because it is sacred. There will be days when the old self whispers, urging her back into old patterns, to argue, to prove, to defend. But she smiles gently at that voice, knowing it is only fear longing for familiarity. She thanks it, then releases it, for she has outgrown the need to fight for peace. She simply is peace. The unstoppable woman is not the loudest in the room. She is the one whose stillness changes the air. She is not defined by her past, her relationships, or her roles. She has become her own foundation, her own sanctuary, her own home. And in that home, within her own soul, she rests, no longer searching, no longer performing, no longer waiting for life to grant her peace, because she has realized the greatest secret of all. Peace was never something to find. It was something to remember, and once remembered, it can never be forgotten. Thank you for spending this time with us. Your journey gives life to this channel. Stay with us, and together we'll keep exploring, growing, and discovering the truths that shape the soul. Until the next video, take care and see you soon.